Okay, so now we shall begin. Let me just look at the title again. That which is can never cease to be. That which is not will not exist. So it was sent a bit of the Bhagavad Gita, a quote from the Bhagavad Gita, and I just thought I could read it out and then talk about that to see what comes. So I think this was from Bhagavad Gita Veda Base. That which is never ceases to be. That which is not will not exist. To see this truth of both is theirs who part essence from accident, substance from shadow, indestructible. Learn thou. The life is spreading life through all. It cannot anywhere, by any means, be any wise diminished, stayed, or changed. Okay, let me go again for that. Reading round 2. Reading round 2. Okay. That which is can never cease to be. That which is not will not exist. To see this truth of both is theirs who part essence from accidents, substance from shadow. Indestructible learn thou. The life is spreading life through all. It cannot anywhere, by any means, be any wise diminished, stayed, or changed. Wow, that's quite a paragraph. So I like the first sentence. That which is can never cease to be. That which is not will not exist. It's kind of simple, so it kind of reminds me of my friend from university. We used to, in the beginning, she was really into spirituality as well. We used to like study these types of texts, and she would always be like, "This is so obvious." Like, well, that which doesn't exist will never be, and that which exists can never cease to exist. That's, I mean, I suppose that's the profound bit, but the second bit, that which is not will not exist. Yeah, that's obvious. But as opposed to the Western mind, people often think that like when somebody's born, they come out of something beyond life. Whereas I suppose what they're trying to say here is that which doesn't exist can never exist. So it's not, like you can't like go outside of this life and then grab a baby soul and then bring it into life. Like it all comes from this one thing called life. So that which doesn't exist, that which is not will not exist. But it also means that bigger part of you. So that's my inspiration, and now I shall do a springboard like a trampolinist into non-duality. Maybe, yeah. So maybe today we start at the very beginning. Let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. Okay. So in the beginning, there was nothing. And then God said, let there be light. And then we could see things. So in the beginning, you're born. And when you're a baby coming out of the womb, you do not know that you're a baby. You don't come into this life like shoot out of the lady's parts and then suddenly go, oh, my name is Harry. Hello, world. You come into this life and you have no sense that you're a baby. And you can't really remember things. Your memory is still being formed. So you can't really remember that you're in the mother's tummy. The body has some memories of being born, most probably, but you can't really remember that. You just are, and you have nothing that you can identify. You're not like, oh, that is my hand. Hello, hand. Because you don't know that's your hand. You haven't got complex thinking. So there's no identification that happens. So the body doesn't have an energetic center. So what it feels like, even though you can't remember, it feels like you are everywhere. Your essence is everywhere. And what I mean by essence is the consciousness and that sense of being. So they're not, the I am is not located inside the heart, or the consciousness isn't located behind the head. It's everywhere. Like, so when you're looking at the ceiling, there isn't a place where you stop and the world begins. Like, it's one movement. When you look at your hand, it's not like something that's separate from you. It's appearing as you, in you. Although when I say in you, it's just laziness with the words, and also for me to communicate it in a bit more simple way, because there's no in or out of you. Like, you don't find an outside of you, but saying in makes it simpler to say. Really, it's like as you. And then the question is what is that you? That you is not a thing. It's not an object. It's not an emotion. It's not a feeling. It's not the body. It's not your genetics. It's not your karma. It's not what you've done. It's not what you're going to do. It's not your job, even though as a baby you don't really have a job, just except to be a baby. So you're like, I'm going to work with my little briefcase being a baby. It's not really like that, obviously. So there is nothing which you are. Nothing. Nothing, 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 nothing. Anything that you think you could be is an experience and something that comes and goes. So what's being pointed to is that which is eternal and always here, which is this sense of consciousness and beingness that never, ever, ever leaves. And this consciousness is non-existent and existence simultaneously. It's absolutely nothing. Like, not a nothing you can see, like a nothing in deep sleep that you don't even know, you can't even see it. And all of this world is appearing out of that no thing. Like, everything comes from it. It's not even appearing out of it, it is it. So when you look at your computer now, or you look at the wall, you imagine that that wall and that computer appears because of time, but that's your imagination. In this very moment, it appears out of no thing, and that no thing isn't a place you can find. Like, you can't find deep sleep. It just is. It's there at the source of everything, and that no thing is infinite. It's beyond anything that can be contained. Even the idea of infinite, it's beyond. It's no size, no place, no thing, no thing. You could also call it God, magic, and it's not the source of everything. It is everything. So everything is that no thing, and no thing is that everything. Some people call it the source, which is just language. It's pedantics, no. Phonetics, no. I forgot. My God, language sometimes is such a struggle for me. My mind forgets it so quickly. Yeah. So right now, you think you're listening to me and that I'm speaking, but that's just the story in time. So apparently it's coming through the Lisa body and it comes out with the Lisa flavor. Like for lots of people that have listened for many years, you're like, oh yeah, heard this before. And maybe I say it slightly differently because I'm kind of like that. I'm always changing. But in the moment, it's coming from nothing. So that's the true experience. That's the absolute experience. That's the unquestionable experience. And then you've got this questionable experience of memory, which is saying, okay, Lisa comes from time and Lisa's going into the future. And that's your imagination. You never experience that. You never experience going into the future. You never experience coming from the past, and you never experience your objects coming from the past. You experience a memory which is informing you that they come from the past. And what happens in the human world is they identify with this. They get really involved with this story of time. And then they begin to believe that they are an object that goes into time. So as the baby, they don't. The baby is just like pure awakeness. And that awakeness exists and doesn't exist. It's the nothingness and everything. So nothingness and everything. It's conscious of itself, but that consciousness is not located. The consciousness is the things. And the same with the I am, the sense of beingness. And I always split them up, but the I am and the consciousness are one and the same thing. It's this aliveness, this knowing of oneself. And that never leaves. That's your birthright. That was there prior to birth. It's just there might have been nothing appearing, so it wasn't recognized. But it's still there. And it's what's there after death as well. And it's freedom. It's absolute love. Absolute love. So if we go back to being the baby again, that you're born into this world absolutely free. You leave this world absolutely free, and you live your life absolutely free with the illusion that there is somebody suffering in your life. Now let's get on to what suffering is and what identification is. So somewhere at the age of 2 or 3 years old, an energetic contraction arises in the body, and I suspect this is genetic as well as conditioned. So your parents are like, you, who's a good baby? Who's a good baby? Eat the dinner. Yes, Derek is a good baby. Who's a good boy? Yes, he's a good boy. He's a good boy. Don't be a bad boy. Good boy, good boy, good boy, good boy. That's what we do to the babies. And so it's mostly, I would say, a genetic phenomena that arises. And I suspect that identification and separation happened when language formed. If you look at Christianity and the story of Adam and Eve, like so Eve ate the apple of knowledge and became aware of her nakedness and got chucked out of the Garden of Eden. So I suspect that it was the intellect which brought about separation, and I suspect that's what they're talking about in the Bible, although I don't really know. I haven't really studied the Bible very much, even though I'm brought up in a Christian society. At about 2 or 3 years old, identification happens, and it's most probably really sudden, and it's an energetic contraction in the body. And I suppose what's happening in the body is the body is contracting through the cells some way. And that contraction, this energetic contraction, makes it feel that that's who you are. So it makes it feel like who you are is inside this body. So before, consciousness was everywhere and consciousness was free and your sense of being was free. And it's still free after that, but that contraction makes your body feel like you exist inside the body. Pardon me. And from that, seeking arises. So the moment, because that contraction is attention. You could say it is seeking maybe, or attention, but or a lie. It's not true. There's something wrong with that. So as soon as that happens, seeking arises in the person, because there's always going to be, well, that exists inside the body, something not quite right. This moment is not quite right. There's something slightly off in this moment. And then the human goes on this elaborate journey into time to try and find a solution for not feeling quite right. And that is very colourful, dramatic and adventurous, but it inevitably leads to suffering the more and more it's played. So in the beginning, when it first happens to the child, it's like maybe like just getting a tiny little stone in your shoe. By the time you're like in your 50s, if you've never explored this subject, then it's like having a big massive boulder in both shoes, because the seeking energy has grown and it's like unleashed this craziness of thinking and this craziness of mind, and then that has unbalanced your chakras and your emotional center, and then that in turn has made the mind and thinking worse. So when you are 3 years old, it doesn't feel that bad. It's just a tiny feeling of feeling out of place. And I'm sure it's traumatic for everyone for that to happen, but it's very small, that seed in the beginning. And this isn't about behavior, because prior to the baby, the 2 or 3 year old baby identifying, the baby cried from pain and the baby giggled with joy. So what people project onto me when I'm saying this is they think that what I'm saying is this is the end of pain and this is becoming karmically an amazing lightened being, but it's really not that. The baby will have particular behaviors. I'm sure if you've had kids, you'll see this, that they come out of the womb with like very strong personalities, and then they kind of like grow into that and it becomes more obvious. So if you've got like you can have like a really stubborn child from day one and they're like very stubborn and maybe very determined, and then you can have like a really placid and laid back child. And this is karma and this is magic. It's the combination of the genes, and then it's karma from previous lives, which is kind of genetics. And it's not that. Behavior isn't it. Behavior is something that happens in the human body and it's a reaction of the body. So it's not about feelings and emotions and always having positive emotions. I know a lot of people say that, and you know, maybe they're more advanced or maybe they're not, maybe they're less advanced, I don't know really. But my experience is that it's not. No, not my experience. My knowing, like from everything that's happened to me, I know it's not about behavior. But I can't explain why a lot of sutras and teachers talk about behavior. Like, I think that it has an effect on behavior, but it's really not about behavior. I think that there is a stage that the person has to go through when they've really identified, and there are a lot of mental suffering. We have to settle that down. But then it's not about behavior, because the baby knows how it can have tantrums for hours. It can have attachment disorders. It can have all types of problems, prior to the age of 2. But then this identification happens, which is an energetic thing, and then the seeking begins. And this seeking tries to form a character, a steady, solid character in which you are, and then it tries to fulfill that character. So all of us have characters, but the seeking energy tries to own that character. So I've got a particular character, just like everybody else has, but it changes, and it's not solid. It can always change, and it can always evolve dependent on the energies, dependent on who I'm interacting with. It's not a solid thing, but the separate person tries to make themselves solid. And this is kind of encouraged in society. You have to be one way. And I can understand why it's encouraged in society, because it makes people feel safe. So if they know who they're always relating to, it makes them feel safe. If any of you have had friends with multiple personality disorder or certain mental health issues, and you've seen people change characters rapidly in front of you, it's a little bit scary. So I can see why a stable society would want the people to maintain a solid sense of self, because it makes society easier to manage and relationships easier to manage. It's a lot harder to manage relationships when your characters are changing a lot. So Khaleesi has a particular personality, but she doesn't care at all. There's nothing in there that wants to be a good dog. Like, she does want to be a good dog, like, because she wants to please me and get the chicken, but she doesn't care. Like, there's nothing in there that's identifying with it. She's not like blowing her little doggy whistle to all her friends and being like, hey, look at me, other dogs. Look how good I'm being. She just doesn't care. She's not like, there's not something inside her that's trying to make a personality, a strong personality. And sometimes this, like in our society, if you look at psychology, that this can be promoted as healthy. And I can understand that as well, because you can do better in this life if you know what you want and what you don't want, and you can create firmer relationships. But that's not what we're talking about. Put that aside, and that's something else. What this is this energy that's a seeking energy that's claiming to be something, and then on top of that, it's then trying to fulfill that illusory something that's claiming to be. So it creates this person, like, I am this person, I am a lawyer, I am a doctor, I am a dog walker, I am an eco-warrior. So it claims this personality, and then it tries to fulfill it. And I really forget these games. I have to remind myself. Like, it tries to fulfill being that. So if it's an eco-warrior, then it will want to have a Facebook page maybe, or an Instagram page, where it's like throwing out lots of pictures of being an eco-warrior. Or maybe it's always trying to do that or talk about it. If you're wanting to be a great mother, then maybe you're always showing people like all the great things that you do with your kids. If you want to be a a great animal lover, then maybe you're volunteering at lots of charities. But it's all kind of about growing yourself. It's not really in flow, like you're semi doing it from the heart. There's some part of you that I'm sure resonates with it, but then there's this other layer of adding it on. Like when I was younger, I remember distinctly that part of traveling, I did a lot of traveling when I was younger, was about the way it looked to other people, the way it made me appear. I really forget that. And part of being spiritual, I remember like becoming Buddhist, and then suddenly I wanted to wear lots of Buddhist looking clothes so people would know I was Buddhist. Like there's this other part of us that's like wants to be something, and that's different from like enjoying dressing up. It's like this energy of trying to be something, and even if you're not conscious of it, then there might be a strong unconscious of it running. So you might noticing it in like your partnership, like you really want your partner to see you as good, and so you're always behaving in a good way. It doesn't mean that you haven't got like a natural energy to want to do that, and underneath that there's an energy to do that. It's like this other energy that's like claiming for itself, building itself up. Like you could say the seeker is like this greed monster, like it's always blowing itself up to be something because it's terrified of not existing. It's terrified of death, because that's what it is to really explore this, like really explore this illusion of who you think you are. What is that? And in the end, it's death. Because if you dismantle everything that you believe you are, then it's like the big void that people are afraid of. Like right now, who are you? Who are you without all these labels and all these divisions with people? Like to sit with someone and be nothing is so super vulnerable. Like I used to feel like I couldn't look people properly in the eyes because of it. Because it's like making love to someone. Like they are yourself. And I was like, oh God, this is inappropriate if they're you. Like not literally like doing the business, cementing the deal, but energetically, because yeah, it's like making love. Everything is yourself. Because the momentum of making love, what can make making love really beautiful and tantric, is melting into each other energetically. So there's no longer division. And that's what makes making love really orgasmic, is when that happens. But it can also happen when there's no sexuality, that you are just sitting with someone and there's no boundary between you and them. And it's so vulnerable and loving and beautiful. Yeah. Sometimes I remember when it first started happening, I felt like, oh God, I can't look at people. Like this is so invasive. If they knew that I was making love with them energetically, and then like like a dog would look at me and I'd be like, oh God. Or yeah. But it wasn't just people or animals, or it was also the wall. It was everything. But it just felt so different from what I'd been used to. But it requires like no boundary as to what you are, like no defense. It doesn't mean you don't defend. Like if someone walks up to you and they spill a coffee over you, you don't defend and be like, what did you just do? Like if they go and clean my clothes, it doesn't mean that. It's energetical. It's beyond words. And I'm still learning to do that, how to live that as a human. But that's what the awakening is, and it's so terrifying to that identity that wants to be something. Okay, so let's go back to to becoming identified. So when the child becomes identified at, say, 2 or 3 years old, the seeking begins, this tightness in the body begins, and then it feels like you are something solid looking out from the body, and then this doesn't feel quite right, so then you seek. So what the child does is it looks to its environment, to its family, to its schooling, and it listens to all the information that it's been told, and it's being told a lot that money is happiness, having a family maybe is happiness, having a good job is happiness, and then it begins to believe this momentum as well. So not only does it build up its ego, its sense of self, it then begins to believe that all these things that I acquire are going to give me happiness. And what it's actually looking for is the emptiness, is the melting away, is non-existence, which is existence. But what it's told is that the happiness is in the future. So then what it does is it looks for that freedom in time. So it looks for it in emotions. And the emotions, most people think my emotions are dependent on what's happening around me. So then it looks to things that it can obtain, like cars or houses or people or friends. So, and the friends also depend on emotions. So our emotions are part of this. Sometimes we either cut off with emotions or we become very lost in emotions and get overly involved in them. So some people get really cut off and they can't feel below their head. They're just a walking head and two eyes. The body's like non-existent. And then you've also got the other people that are like too emotional and always looking to try to find emotional stability outside, and then they can't. So then there's lots of blame and anger and emotions. So you've got these two different dynamics that can arise, and there's many more as well. I'm just summarizing. And this is the lie. And what seems to happen in this subject is there seems to be a settling of that person. So the seeking is reduced. The person does activities to reduce its seeking. So it does meditation, it does yoga, it does breathing exercises, it does therapy to reduce its seeking, and it does things in its life to reduce maybe stress or discomfort in its life. It becomes more simple maybe. And then as it becomes more simple and more reduced, then there seems to be the possibility for non-duality to be heard beyond the person. When the person is too noisy, it seems impossible for that to be heard. I don't know why that is, it just is the way it is. And what I mean by heard is that you hear non-duality being spoken, or you see something incredibly beautiful and that barrier melts away, and then there's something else that's known, and that's called awakening. And that is, in the end, God's will. That's grace. Everything is grace. So even you reducing your seeking is grace, but in that it appears like there's somebody that's doing it. So it appears like there's somebody that's showing up to meditate, but there is absolutely nothing that the person can do to switch on the button of not existing, because the person is a thing, so it can't become an unthing. That person can't become enlightened. That person can't get non-duality. But the person can seemingly put in information about meditation, put in information about therapy, and the body-mind begins to change. And that process makes it more receptive, more than likely, to non-duality, although I can't guarantee it. This is just from my observation and what seemingly happened here. But you can't press non-existence on. That happens. There seems to be a surrender that happens, and that sometimes can be through events externally. We don't know why it is, but there's some form of surrender and collapse that happens, and that is grace.